Hello, everyone. I'm starting the show today. It's Galerie, Julian Center TV. Today we'll be talking with Taylor Poole, who I think will be joining in just a moment. Hi, Jan. Good to see you. There's a guest on the Galaxy Note 8. Lovely. Oh, a whole bunch of people. Okay, there's Taylor. So I'm going to promote Taylor to a panelist at this point and go into gallery view. And Taylor,
hi guys.
how are you? Got a couple people here. We're 7 people in total at this point. James, I see, is here again, as is Jan. Lovely to see you, Jan. And we've got a couple of new folk. So good to see you. This is welcome to the Friars Roast.
Here I am.
Here you are. Indeed. So let's talk briefly about how you and I met, just so that we have some time to get some people join in either through the live stream or join into this webinar. Who, in case anyone is out there and wants to join in the webinar, the address is galleryjuliansander.de/TV. And there's a link at the bottom where you can sign up in case you want to join in. Great. So, Taylor, do tell.
Yes. So, how we first met? Is that it?
Yes. First question. How did we meet?
Yeah. So it was, I believe it was in 2018 that we first met at Paris Photo, and it was my first time being at Paris Photo, and I was just walking around the entire event, and I come across your booth. And I saw some amazing photographs from photographer Sean Hemmerly. And I was looking at them for a while. And I was like, man, these 6x6 black and white portraits, something that I personally relate to. I was like, man, if this photographer was in-house now, I would have to have a coffee with him. So thankfully I had the guts. I went up and had a quick chat with you. And you're like, actually, Sean is around. If you want to wait, you can have a coffee with him. So thankfully, Sean and I chatted for quite a bit. And then Sean formally introduced me to you. And I think at that time, you didn't realize I lived in Germany. And so you're like, why don't you come back to Paris Photo next year and bring your work and I can see it. I was like, okay, sounds good. 1 whole year. Oh man, that's going to be a long time. But then I actually paid 30 euros next day just to get into Paris Photo again, just so that I could come back and tell you and say, hey, I actually live in Nuremberg, a 4-hour drive. Why don't we just meet in a few months? And yeah, and then I think from there, the rest is history. And yeah, you opened your doors to me very kindly.
Well, it was, yes, and I tend to do that.
Yeah,
it's not to giving yourself praise is always kind of stinky. So take that in due stride, but I try and be supportive where I can. Yeah, which is the whole reason why we're here today. This, one of the major topics that I'm seeing in this, this whole TV series started as a way for me to interact with an audience who couldn't come to my gallery because it's closed, which fortunately for everybody, we're going to be opening under some heavily restrictive health conditions or prerequisites, hopefully next week on Tuesday. So that's just a little bit of good news because Germany has apparently done well with how we're dealing with the current pandemic, and everyone is on board to try and bring back degrees of normality insofar as possible. And Cologne is one of the cities where we're allowed to do that. So that's just a shout out to anybody in the Cologne area who wants to come by and see some work when they get a chance to get out of the house. So and one of the topics that we discussed in past sessions was the art market on the whole and the changes therein, and how to reach galleries, how to get representation, the fact that there are too many artists. You know, the storage houses are full of not only or of primarily art that's been purchased by somebody, which means that the people who have it don't want to get rid of it. And so there's all these issues, which I'm bringing into the conversation at this stage, because one of the challenges that I'd like you to speak to is beyond making work and making good work, and how you define that for yourself, is also what's the motivation to keep going, which I don't want to go into as a first point, because I think it's more important, particularly for the people who don't know your work, that you maybe share your screen and then start talking about the pictures that that you've done, and
Yeah.
and you know what the impetus was behind them. And maybe at this point I should also bring up that in terms of how to handle questions and so on in this conversation or in this meeting, there's a chat which everyone has access to, and I see that some people have, well, Taylor, you're one of them, and Galaxy Note 8 has also made a comment here. So I would ask, while you're presenting, that people put their questions there, and maybe you can bring up the chat window and keep an eye on it parallel.
Yeah.
See what else is going on, so that if somebody has a direct question, they don't vocally interrupt your flow, but you get a chance to capture it and respond to it in time. Second thing is, after Taylor is done, I'm going to open the conversation up to everybody, which means I'll be promoting everybody to presenters, so that we can all get into the conversation and discuss. I assume that everybody here is kind and friendly, but for the sake of social media etiquette, this is not a crush session. This is, if at all, a discovery and a critique session. And if anyone is acting like an asshole, I will treat them accordingly. So, so I said that so everybody knows.
Good.
Okay, so the stage is yours. Pick
All
it.
right. Great. So your original question was, you know, why do I keep creating and why do I keep doing photography, right?
Correct.
So I think that's a very personal story for me, because honestly, I felt like photography came into my life purely as a gift. Like at age 15, I was given a film camera, and from that point on, 15 years later, now I'm 30. Every camera that I own, like, I've actually never bought a camera myself. Somehow someone has like said, hey, I see that you're doing photography. Here is a camera. Please use it to the best of your ability. And so, like, my Rolleiflex here, this was my great uncle's camera that my aunt gave me about 10 years ago. My pinhole camera, I won on a contest last year.
And you have
And
a tripod stand on that?
What's up?
Do you have a tripod clip on the bottom of that?
I do, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So actually, I feel like somehow destiny made it known to me that I need to do photography, because cameras have just been landing in my lap, and I feel that responsibility that, like, all right, I need to do photography. I have to, because or else all this is for nothing. And why would someone give me this amazing Rolleiflex from 1965? You know, and besides it being a good decoration, it needs to be used. And so for me personally, I have that standard, that base of gifts, like it's all been given. And at that point, I had just kept taking photos. And I think like, if you know me as a person, I need to connect with people. Connection is a huge thing. I'm all about getting to know the person personally. And I think that's my Kansas side. You know, we are very warm, cultured people. We'll have a very deep conversation very quickly. But photography is a way for me to really connect with someone on a personal level or a place. And I was thinking about, why do I do analog film? And so I have nothing against digital at all. It's just ever since at 15, that's when I started to do analog photography, and I just never stopped and I never changed. So analog is just something that I'm used to. That's what I work with, and I really feel like I'm doing something with my hands. You know, I can develop the film, I can take the negative, I can print it in the dark room. I then at the end, I have like an actual print that I was able to use my hands throughout the entire process. And so I think that's very important, because I look at analog photography as, you know, every picture does matter, because technically in this camera, I can only take 12 photos. I can't take 100 photos all at once. I can only take 12. Each photo cost about 50 to 60 cents. And so it really gives me a whole new perspective and meaning to just slow down, think about the composition, think about the lighting, think about the subject, and do I actually want to take a photo of this? Is it really that meaningful, or is it kind of just something that I can pass by and not worry about? And so I feel like if I didn't have a film camera, I would just be able to take photos of everything and then edit down them later without really having to think too much about it. But analog for me has really slowed me down. And so that is kind of why I keep creating, because it's something that I'm able to capture important things that mean a lot to me in a very personal and special way. And yeah, so should I share my screen now, or?
Yeah, that would be the best way to show the work, certainly.
Okay, yeah. All right, let me do this. Here we go. All right. Okay, so
as a quick note on, or initial thought on the restraints of the analog medium, you know, I've heard that as one of the ideas connected to that particular technical process.
yeah.
And although I clearly see it and I understand the questioning, or, you know, the impact that how should I say, the weight of economics, the weight of pragmatic restraint, how that plays a role in photography. But and this is not to step too close to you, but you can create that form of restraint with any camera.
True.
Because what you're doing is you're using it. It sounds like you're using it to force yourself to really consider the pictures that you're taking. And so I just wanted to mention that, because I you know, I see it and I understand it, and I think that the process you use to get to that form of focus, any means to get you there is valid, but I think that there's a way to get there without the medium itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Basically, what I'm suggesting is that they are not intrinsically bound, they are accidentally bound in your case. And I think that's an important thing for photographers and artists in general to understand, that these connections are not necessarily rigidly bound.
Mm.
You know, there are things, for example, a wet collodion print is going to have a very specific aesthetic, which you can't get in a digital print because it doesn't use metal. A digital print has no metal in it, so you can't get a silvered surface or a daguerreotype. You can't get that silvering. So that would be a physical restraint that is required. So I just wanted to throw that out there before.
Right.
Sorry for the curveball.
Right. I mean, I could train myself to slow down as well and use a digital process and camera. And that would take some time getting used to. And I know thousands of people who do that and still produce amazing, beautiful photos. So it's not a specific analog thing that only analog photographers experience. It's just something that you have to train yourself in any art form or medium. It just so happens that for me, it's with analog.
Yeah.
And
no, I'm in no way critiquing the method that you use. It's about the work. Whatever's required to get the work, that's what you need to do. That was more a point of reference for people who are thinking about photography, particularly those who are bound to a very particular anachronistic idea that only analog photography is real photography, and that entire argument and discussion around
right.
the material worshippers who run around at the Church of Silver and the temple of whatever,
Temple of
darkroom red lighting.
Yeah.
Whatever,
No, I'm definitely not going to preach the message that analog photography is the only way. So,
as a quick note, though, also, which I'm sure you know, but maybe not, Sean has in the past done, and I think he still does, a lot of work with a 6x7 analog camera, which he then scans and processes. And I think that's a really interesting process that he uses. And he's very particular about what he's doing and what he's looking for. So,
yeah,
I think there's no real right or wrong per se.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. So I interrupted your screen share. So,
no worries. All right. Okay. So you can see my screen now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. So these black and white 6x6 photos are from my Istanbul series. Oh, someone wrote a message. And so I was in Istanbul in 2017, I believe, or 18. Yeah. Anyways, a few years ago, and I specifically went there for 1 week to come up and challenge myself and create a photography concept, and just to put myself in a new place for 1 week, and just to kind of see what would happen. And like, for example, this fisherman taking a nap from his full day of fishing. I felt like I kind of had one chance before he would wake up or notice me, or maybe he wasn't sleeping, maybe he was just having a think. But this is where I feel like with analog photography, it's like I have found my rhythm and speed with it. And rather than just taking, okay, maybe 10, 20 photos, hoping that I get one, I was able to figure out the composition, knowing that I want the church or the mosque in the background, giving it a sense of place, having his feet and his fishing pole not cut off from the frame, and just focusing on, like, this is a typical day for a Istanbul fisherman. On this bridge, there's hundreds of people there, and yeah, I just feel like with this kind of process, I'm able to slow down and single one person out and kind of highlight their reality in a special and different way. I can't. How do I do this? All right. This one is a lot of people tend to tell me that this is one of their favorites from the series, and I believe it's like, I mean, in this photo, it's obviously at night, it's raining. You see his umbrella with raindrops on it. It's one soft lamp lighting up his face. And we're actually standing on the street under a shop light. And my friend and I, we just started talking with the shop owner, having a Coke. And then his friend comes over, and I don't know, they're just making jokes. We don't really know what's going on, but I just saw this really beautiful, soft moment with the lighting, with the rain, and how his umbrella wires are coming out of his head like that, or they actually go into his face for you to kind of like, it's kind of grabs you to go directly towards his face. And this is with. I was handheld. There was no tripod. It was like maybe a 40th of a second. Luckily, it's in focus. And I feel like this is kind of where the magic of film happens, because I was totally unsure actually if this photo is going to work, if it's going to be blurry or out of focus. But I think kind of getting those magical elements right, the technical information right, when it all comes together as one, it can do something great. And I would say this is one of my favorite portraits I've taken in a while. It's so simple, but I think that moment of surprise, knowing that I developed it a few weeks later when I came back to Germany, and I didn't even know at the time if it was going to work out or not. Let's see here. Yeah, this
picture, it'd be interesting to see that cropped without the hand, because that would more highlight the the umbrella coming from his head. I was just without the hand there, just covering it up, and that could be an interesting way to look at it, because then there's also the dynamic of the question: what is that? Like, why is how was that scene created? That was just an initial response I had to it, thinking about particularly as you're highlighting that geometric form, or that kind of semi-geometric or mechanically organic form coming out of his head.
Right. This photograph as well, I'm particularly proud of. I think it's one of those street photography moments where everything happens so fast, and you are waiting around for a few minutes, and it finally happens, and you click the shutter, and you're just like, all right, let's see if I actually got the shot or not. But these two guys were smoking and talking, and I guess having a work break, and I was standing about 5 meters away, and they didn't really notice me. I saw their background, I saw the light, and I don't know, I was sensing something was going to happen, so why don't I just stand there, wait around, and just see what happens. Well, I had my camera settings set, my focus set. All I had to do was just click the button. And then I see them going for a cigarette. I take the photo, and then can you see my mouse here on the screen? Okay. As I'm printing, I kind of found a name for this photo. It's called the definition of friendship, because it's two guys going in for one cigarette or for one flame, but then starting from the points of their heads, going down to the flame and back up, it kind of creates a heart. if you kind of see that geometric, like
yeah, I see that.
Yeah. And that's something that I love, is that these two guys have no idea kind of what I'm seeing. Well, they have no idea at all that I took a photo, what I'm seeing. But I think this is kind of where the magic of street photography can happen, is if you wait around long enough, if you see something kind of boiling up and you're waiting for that moment to hit the button, it can sometimes work or sometimes completely fail. But for me, I feel like with this one, I became very proud of it. But
yeah, it's a very, very good and clear composition. It's nice.
Yeah, I've had some people say that that there's too much open space at the top, but I mean, I can only crop so much.
There's a portrait or a picture of Billie Holiday laying in her casket in the current exhibition at the Gallery, which Lisette Model took with a rolli from the balcony at the church where she was buried. And out of the 6x6 negative, she cropped this tiny little, like, microscopic little piece out of it. Yeah. And that's the picture. Wow. So that's not true. You can crop as much as you damn well please.
I actually want to say something about cropping, is that I totally believe and love the idea of cropping. And I feel like for so long, I was taught that, cropping is not okay. You should only take the photo when it's perfect, and then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? The last years, I totally believe in the art of editing and cropping.
Oh yeah, totally.
And cropping has saved my life so many times.
It is, this entire idea that like everybody gets all bunged up about these constraints and restraints. I mean, you can do that as an exercise. You can say, okay, I'm going to challenge myself to do this as an exercise. Or if you have a aspect ratio constraint that you're working for a particular job, like you need an 8 by 13 print, or you need a square print, well, then it's very clear you need to have something that's square, right?
Mhm.
But that's a prerequisite based on the end goal. But doing that as like a mindset, it's like the 70s were full of this, where museum, oh God, it's like the most horrible stuff. My grandfather used to, he would make prints of my great grandfather's negatives, and he would do the whole negative. It's like,
No.
August wrote on the damn negative. He wrote stuff on it. He didn't want
Yeah.
that in the picture. It's clear that he didn't want that in the picture.
Yeah.
And the entire point, it's like, come on, people. Like, because, you know, and part of me thinks that it has to do with the cameras becoming so advanced and so user friendly that everyone is now looking for new reasons to make it hard, and are by doing so completely bypassing the hardest part, which is actually making a good picture. Like they think that if you like, okay, you need to tie your shoes now with one hand behind your back. Okay, now you need to tie your shoes with your teeth. Or so it's like this ridiculous set of rules, and the whole point is getting your shoes tied so you can go running. It's not about tying the shoes; it's about running. It's about walking or about going. You know, so you can tell I can get all bunched up about that. So if anybody ever tells you to not crop your stuff, tell them to fuck themselves.
It's true. It's so true, because I think for so long I mean, it's good in the beginning to learn rules and to learn, like, you do this step 1, step 2, step 3, but then, you know, and then over time, if you make that your religion, then you aren't being free with what you love to do. You're just following rules.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's what I learned in the last years, is that, you know, like, okay, I have a really amazing foundation of photography in the last 15 years, but I need to break some rules. I need to try new things. And if I want to crop 100 times, I'm going to crop, and I don't care, you know, because I think people sometimes try to make it harder for themselves because that's somehow more artsy. But in the end, what you have taught me, what's most important is that you just need to have a good photograph, and that in itself is almost impossible, you know. Well, it feels like that, but it's just getting a plain and straight photograph is hard. So anyway.
All right, so let's get to some of your newer pictures, which you
Okay, let's do this. So you can see my screen now. All right, so these photos are all with my, oh, do you see that? Is that all pink?
Yeah.
That's weird. Okay.
That's on your end.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So these photos are all taken with my pinhole camera, which I showed earlier. I'll show again whenever I stop showing the screen. But so my new project that I've been working on and printing a lot is from Florence. And my wife and I were in Florence for 1.5 years for her studies. And I think at that point in time in my life, you know, we uprooted our lives. We moved to Florence, and she was in full-time school. I had to kind of figure out my own life for 1.5 years. And that is where I feel like the city of Renaissance, the city of Florence, totally overwhelmed me in a positive way. And it just gave way to new creative paths and creative ways for me to express photography. And crazily enough, at that exact time as well, I won this pinhole camera on a Instagram contest. And so again, it's as if fate has given me a free camera to use at this point in my life, to use for photography, and I had to do something about it. So I went every other day in Florence for a year and a half and constantly was photographing architecture and streets and movement and light. And what I love about the pinhole camera is that, you know, with this building, it looks monumental because it is, but it has that kind of stretched look to it because that's what a pinhole camera can do. You can be so close to a subject and it kind of stretches and curves because of just how the pinhole camera is built. And it just kind of gives a fresh view on a building that people have been photographing for the last 10 years on their phones. And I feel like, you know, I was going around the city taking photos of very normal things that people see every single day. But I was thinking, you know, how can I do something that's just a little bit different, that's not going to be your everyday photograph? And kind of that's where lith printing came in the picture. And I'm going to zoom in here, and you see all these the textured grains and dots, and that is just from the lith printing process. And
that's a relic of the final process.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that, again, you know, I was in the city of Renaissance, surrounded by amazing art, new culture, new food, and I needed to do something new with my photography. And so I couldn't just settle on the classic black and white 6x6 street photography. I had to do something different. And that's why, using the pinhole, I decided to go with lith printing, add some color, add some orange, some brown, yellow, and let's just, you know, throw in that really extra graininess. So with this image, what I like here, all right, this is a beggar who's sitting in front of the church. And then directly opposite of her, you have here an angel. And I just feel like there's some kind of some kind of reflection or story here with these two people. And it's a tale as old as time, you know. We've seen it in movies and stories, beggars in front of churches, you know, the rich and the poor, needy and whatever. And I just feel like, I don't know, there's some kind of narrative here with these two people here that has caught my interest in this photo. And I try not to be so abrasive, or I try not to be so abrasive by getting too close to her, because I still wanted the image to not really be about her, but to be about the whole scene, and the angel as well, looking out over her.
Okay.
Let's see here. Also, very simply put, I tried to, there we go. I wanted to photograph the very special but very general things of the Florentine life. And so one of those, for example, is the Lampredotto stands, which is like a panino with pig stomach. Or tripe, that's it.
Right.
And that is this very specific Florentine dish that the Florentines are very proud of. And it's good, but I wanted to somehow, how can I honor Florence in this time by photographing the obvious things in a new way? And so I just love that being here, spending 30 minutes here and taking different images of the Lampredotto stand with people eating, having lunch. You see people here. And then in the background is the synagogue, the only synagogue in Florence. And I don't know, I just like having the, I guess you could say juxtaposition with the Lampredotto stand amidst something very holy and regal, yeah. But also, I'm not trying to make so much meaning out of it. I just like that this is very Florence. And this is what makes me think of Florence. Or this is what reminds me of Florence.
All right, cool.
So.
And so I guess the aesthetic of all of these pictures comes primarily from the fact that you're using basically a Stone Age camera.
Basically. So let me see here. Yeah, this camera is literally just a wooden box. And this is the shutter. There's no focusing. There's no setting the aperture or shutter speed. I just have to put it on a tripod, point it down, up, left, right, and then open, close. So
it's manual. There's not even an automated shutter. So it's literally like Mojo old school.
yeah, it's literally just a box. It's a wooden box that takes photos.
And is the aperture that large? I mean,
No. So this is the safety shutter, and then when I open this, you see that tiny hole somewhere. Yeah. So that is the exposure, like the pinhole. Yeah.
The last picture you were just showing us looked or reminded me a bit of photographs from Venice in the 19th century, where you could see the people as ghosts.
This one?
Yeah, that looks like there's people walking.
Yeah, so this is actually a 1 minute exposure on a rainy day. You can see that it's wet here.
Yeah.
And again, when I took this photo, developed it and printed it in the darkroom, man, this girl made the photo for me, because I think if you cut her out, you would say this photo is taken in the 1960s or so.
Yeah, she gives it some contemporary context because of the sneakers and all that.
Yeah, white shoes, white pants. That's yeah. So again, I wanted to just simply take a photo of the Ponte Vecchio Bridge, which millions or thousands of people do every single day. But how could I give it a little twist or flair to it? And yeah, like I think again, I'm crazy about this grain, about this texture, I feel like I'm visually feeling something with the photo because there's a little bit of texture there. And now having her with her legs crossed, and I realized she was sitting there for a good whole minute, cross legs, not moving. So I was super lucky.
Maybe she knew what you were doing.
Maybe. So, all right.
You know, what's interesting is when you were first speaking about your process, you spoke to the fact that your connection with the people is very important, and getting to know who you're photographing, and so you can render them. And what you're showing here are pictures that are more voyeuristic.
True.
Both are valid strains, and neither one has a greater or lesser position inside of the artistic process. But I do find it interesting that you're basically a camera voyeur, which is it's curious, like even in the middle of the scene with that bar, like, what would be a bar tabac in Paris, I guess is what that thing is, in, like the place where people get together. You're putting the viewer in the position of being a non-participant inside of the scene, like a ghost. You're giving the people a chance to become a ghost and to see the world from your eyes, but not inside of it. They're not being assailed by the picture in any way. And it's a very curious thing. I don't want to give it any kind of value, but I think it's a very interesting thing that I see is at least in the pictures that you've shown me. And this is also not just based on these 4 pictures. Of course, I've looked at more of your work, and I see this consistently in what you're doing. Now, the question is, from my end, is that a cognizant choice, or is that kind of a not automatic, that's the wrong term. Does it happen because you've never considered another process?
I think after many years of doing a lot of studio portraits, a lot of still portraits, and posing people and setting up things exactly how I want them to be, I have fallen back on this kind of photography where I'm fully in control, but I'm not controlling anyone. And that's something that I really enjoy, because I still want there to be that spontaneousness, that authenticity of the photo, where I'm not telling some stranger, oh, hey, don't cross your legs, or cross your legs for 1 minute because I'm taking a photo. But it's like, I see it as it comes. And I just think after many years of posing people, I would just prefer to be the photographer and try and get like the spirit of the place as it's happening, without affecting it too much. If that answers your question, I'm unsure.
Well, it does. It would be interesting. Do you have can you quickly access one of your posed pictures or one of your still lifes?
I can, yeah.
I think it would be interesting for context to see those.
Yeah.
So let's wait till you bring that up, because I have an answer, or not an answer. I have a commentary to what you just said, but I don't want to say it yet.
Okay. Should I share it now?
Yes, please.
All right, where is it here? Okay, so for example, this is in Ethiopia, taken with a Mamiya RZ camera, studio lighting, and reflector. And so,
Yeah,
I mean,
in his eyes.
Yeah, like I love this photo, the detail of his lips, of his eyes, of his skin. It's gorgeous. And oops, I was doing that for a time, but I think after a few years, I just felt like it was too controlled. It took way too long, and I like the mixture of spontaneity and preparation. But this kind of photo, like this kind of way of photographing, it's full preparation. You have to think every detail out until you hit the button. And that just wasn't naturally my speed and my way. But at the same time, with my Rolleiflex camera, I found a good middle ground, because my Rolleiflex is purely a portrait camera, but I'm not telling people what to do. So this is a rickshaw driver in Bangladesh, and it's a portrait. It's like kind of a street and portrait mixed together, but I'm not telling him anything what to do. I don't have a lighting set up with me. I don't have a backdrop. I don't have a, what's it called? A reflector. It's just me and my camera and natural light and the subject.
Well, ultimately, and you're going to probably hate me for saying this, ultimately, that's all you have is you and your camera. I mean, if you have a reflector, if you don't, if you have studio lighting, if you don't, if you talk to the person and tell them to do something, or if you don't, in the end, you really only have you and your camera.
Right.
Which, this is a bit in the direction of what we were discussing earlier with your use of analog for particular restraints or something. I did a lot of photography, jazz musicians. I photographed a lot of live concerts because I was running a jazz club for a while. And that was a really interesting adventure, because just briefly, I was using either a Hasselblad 500C with either analog or digital back, depending on the day, because Phase One was very kind to lend me a digital back for a while to experiment with. And I was also using a D700 or D100 and D700, both of which I still have. So just to kind of give some context to the timing of that. And I can't tell people on stage what to do, clearly.
Right.
Because, it's not a photo shoot, it's a concert. If I do that, I get kicked out. And getting kicked out of your own bar is really embarrassing. So what I ended up doing was looking for pictures and then waiting till the people did what I wanted them to. Which is a completely different thing than what you're discussing. I remember you and I, we had a conversation, it must be about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, where I was talking about challenging your vision, challenging your ideas. And I said, you should take a picture, a print, and you should tear it up and make something new out of it.
Yeah.
As a simple test, not an experiment. And it wasn't so much about the destruction of the work and saying, okay, oh, well, this sucks, I'm just going to prove it to myself.
Yeah.
Because you don't, you're probably far too close to a lot of the pictures you take at this stage to be able to really see what's really great outside of your own understanding, outside of your own experience. These pictures have meaning for you because you've taken them. And that's key. One of the things that I, as a gallerist, have to do is I have to remove that personal connection from the work so that the client, the user, the buyer, the consumer of the visual consumer can understand the work freed up of your particular storytelling. And not that the storytelling isn't important, it may very well be important, and sometimes it becomes extraordinarily important. Because if you see something that you see as one thing, and then the story about it all of a sudden reveals what it really is. I saw a picture on Instagram recently where there's a soldier with a donkey on his back, walking up a hill. And it's the most ridiculous thing because this donkey's like completely chilled out. It's like, all right, I got to ride. This is cool. And the soldier's walking with him. And then at the bottom, it says the reason they did that is because those hills were covered with mines. And the problem with the donkeys was not only would they kill themselves, but if they came walking up beside you while you were walking up the hill, they may well kill you too. And so the simpler way to get up the hill without dying was to have somebody looking for mines and the rest of the guys carrying the donkeys so they wouldn't die on their way up the hill. Which all of a sudden made a very funny looking picture, something very serious.
Yeah.
So, that's an example of a picture where the story then reveals a new layer to it. But, getting back to the process that I was using for taking those pictures at that time, I was looking for very particular pictures and I found them. I didn't find many of them. The 30,000 pictures I took in the year and a half, I have maybe 20 really good pictures, like 20 really good pictures out of 30,000. But of course, you're doing any kind of sports or live motion photography, of course, has a lot of junk that gets produced because you just need to, you see something happening, you need to gun it and see what you can get. And, there we talk about the advantage of digital photography. But back to your process, because we've known each other now for a couple of years and I've seen your work over the years. And I've got to return to that challenge and to further challenges of the like, the background of which is to take a closer look at the process you use and the excuses, and not the excuses in the sense of, like a kid giving you excuses why their pants got dirty or something. Oh yeah, I slipped on a river, bro. Not that kind of excuse. I mean, there's a particular reasoning that you attach to things. And I think it would be important and it would be liberating for you to challenge every single one of those excuses thoroughly and heavily and challenged him and see if you can flip that on its head and see if you can find another way to get there. You know, the portrait, that one picture that you showed us of the man in South Africa, that's a really, really intense picture, you know, because of the granularity and the precision, and you can see the hair. It almost looks like he went in and like brushed his hair properly to give those kind of, you know, like waving look to his hair.
Maybe I
But
did.
on the other side of that, we have the pinhole camera shots. The one that I've seen quite often is the merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, I mean, compositionally, that's just a lovely, that's like an Instagram picture because it's contained, it's in a box, and it, you know, and show it quickly for those who don't know it.
Yeah, I'll show that.
But again, you know, the challenge is you need to figure out what things you really, really, really need. Like, of the things that you use for what you're doing, which of those things do you really, really, really need? And which things can you get rid of? Because the idea of perfection is that you can't take anything away and you can't add anything. Like, perfection is that sweet spot when there's not too much and not too little. It's right in the sweet spot in between. This picture for me, for example, is one that has some very weird pixelation issues on the right side. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
This picture for me really, really works as an image, as a visual image. It's got motion. It's got calm. It's a, you know, compositionally very focused because of the one point perspective of the buildings in the backdrop. You've got two figures balancing, a man and a woman. So there's all these different little parts to it, which give it a real story. You know, inside of the merry-go-round, you have these well-defined lines, like a record on the ceiling, but the whole thing is actually blurry. So there's also contradictions in it. You've got light and dark on the floor. You've got light and dark on the ceiling, or, you know, in the sky. So, you know, this is for, you know, for the compositional construct, this is, for me, an absolutely excellent photograph.
Thank you.
And I think there's a very good reason why people have probably responded to it well. But this, you know, I can see this picture and I can read my own story into all of this. If I compare this, for example, to the first picture of the new series that you showed of the building with the angel on the rooftop and the beggar at the bottom. Exactly, this one. The beggar and the angel only became clear because you told that story. Like, you said that they were there, and now they're there. Now I see them. When I look at it, now I see them. But if I had seen that picture on its own, they wouldn't contain that. Okay. The merry-go-round does. It carries all of that. It has the story in it, and it's readable, it's definable, it's clearly visible, and you can register it even with the grain, even with the toning, even with, you know, the low resolution and the printing process you're using with all the extra graininess, which, and this is just a personal thing, I'm not a big fan of that kind of printing. I prefer, you know, I'm more in the direction of purist on that, in that regard, but that's an aesthetic thing. That's like if you like gin or if you like whiskey. So, you know, that's, again, it's not a question of is the picture good or bad. It's just a personal aesthetic thing. Right. What I gravitate to more. And then what I also think is interesting is, and this is going to be probably, you know, I'm trying to figure out while speaking a way to formulate this. The portrait that you showed us of the black man from South Africa, and I saw another one which seemed to be a friend who was like a bit hunched over without a shirt on, in that same grouping that you had just were picking out of. The aesthetic of both of those, in terms of the way you're inviting the subject to use you as a conduit to the audience, is the same. Okay. this is compositionally extraordinarily well done, nicely lit, nicely placed. You you can get good rendering and all of that, nice detail with the leather belt and the reflection on it. The guy, looks buff and all that. So, there's all these parts are there, but he's looking at you. He's not looking at me.
Mm.
And of course, August Sander is, the voodoo master, the Yoda of getting the person in the camera to look at the viewer and not at August. That was his particular skill set, which I think, that's a challenge to reach that, of course, because it's just really hard to do. It has a lot more to do with humanity and with personality than it does with any kind of technology. You could do that with a pinhole camera. You can do it with, whatever's the newest Canon D5000, blah, 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 whatever. Neither one of those cameras will help you to reach that. That's a person thing, a human thing.
Right.
And what I'm seeing is that it's the same, like, these are what you see. And I think the magic may be in opening up the one little part of what you're doing to get the image to come through the camera, through you, to the audience.
Okay.
And I know that's like a really weird, abstract kind of thing to explain or to say, but I think it's there. And I think visually it's there. I think from the technology, clearly, you have your chops, you know what you're doing. So it's not a question of not being able to process or, there's none of these things are a challenge for you, I think.
Right.
And you're discussing, using analog camera to slow yourself down, all of that process. I think you can bypass all of those crutches. You can put them all aside, and you can use them. I mean, don't use it as a reason to change camera. Just don't think about them. Put them away because you don't need them per se. What you need is to focus on the bit to get the camera and you to become a voice to your audience. Mm-hmm. And right now it looks a little bit like the work that you're doing is a voice of question that you're answering to yourself, which is fine, but that's literally like being on the brink of breaking the sound barrier.
Yeah.
It's like, it's right there. And most of that is going to not be, it's not a difficult thing. It's one of those curses of, oh yeah, God, well, I've been carrying this stupid stone on my back for so many years that I'm used to carrying it. Mm-hmm. It actually becomes easier when you don't consider it. And maybe pictures end up being made that are just not good. And hell, it's your damn right to make pictures that are bad and good and everything in between. There's no, there's no gremium anywhere. There's no, like, they are not sitting in your closet beating you down at night with a rubber hose if you make a bad picture. No one cares. It's your prerogative.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think that's my constant, I wouldn't say struggle, but question. Like, it's just something that's in my head, like, how do I create a body of work or a few images where it goes beyond me, and that it's not for me, but it's speaking to other people. And like, that's unknown. It's something that you can't fully teach. You just have to keep doing and learning and making mistakes and then hearing feedback. So yeah.
There was a story that Sean told me about when he, I think I've told the story before. He was at if I remember correctly, at a party at Bill Hunt's house in New York City, in the penthouse of Bill Hunt's house. He lives on the Upper East Side, like has an apartment with a penthouse right over the Hudson River. And so my dad and Sean are standing up there, and Sean is still at SVA with my brother, I think. And he asked my dad, so, how do I get into a good gallery? And my dad, to Sean's great frustration at the time, said, make good work.
Yeah.
And that's all he said. He said, there's really nothing else. There is nothing else. Make good work. That's it. That's all it is. Nothing else. And in the end, Sean realized that was right. And not to say that Sean is the master. He's a fantastic photographer who I love very much. But what he does do is that he worries about the picture. He worries about making great pictures. That's it. And one way to help maybe to get those responses is to not like to show pictures and to not tell people what it's about. Just show the picture and ask, what do you see?
Yeah.
Send it to your mom, send it to, show it to your wife, show it to your worst enemy and say, hey, look, I want to make peace. What do you think of this picture? And the worst that's going to happen is they're going to curse you out or laugh at you. And if they're your enemy, it doesn't much matter. So whatever, keep, take everything that you think is important about what you do and challenge it and see if it really is important. See if it makes a difference. Can you take that same pictures or that same type of picture that you took in Florence with your iPhone? Can you do it with your Rolei? Is it the camera? Does the camera have voodoo? I mean, in instruments, I know this is the case. I have certain guitars which tend to be played a certain way and other guitars that tend to be played a different way. So maybe it is that case. With cameras, I don't have that issue so much. But that's because that's how it is for me. I may not attach I don't attach any emotion per se to a camera. I just use it.
Right.
But, I'm blessed and cursed with having, been dealing with photography since I can remember. So, so there's that.
Good challenge.
Yeah. Listen, Taylor, this was great. Thank you for showing the work.
Yeah.
I'm going to open up the conversation now and invite everyone to become a panelist. And then if there's anybody who wants to add something to this, they're more than welcome to. So I'm going to go through one at a time and promote everybody here. And this sometimes takes a bit. And there's that. I think in gallery view, there's James out in front of the swimming pool again. I got a good crowd today.
Yeah. You got people from Kansas, England, Nuremberg,
Miami.
Cool.
So anybody who wants to join in or make a commentary, now's the time. Or not.
Or not. Oh, good.
The Galaxy Note 8 is apparently being used in the backdrop. I have no idea who that is. Who's Galaxy Note 8?
No idea.
That must have been a really strange experience at the hospital. All right, what's your child's name? Galaxy, and your last name was Note 8.
Note 8, please.
Well, people may be new to this and not realize that they have to turn their camera on and unmute the sound.
Good point. So everybody who's here, if you turn your camera on, there's I don't know who's on mobile or who's on There we go. There's somebody.
Hey guys.
There's Galaxy. Hi, Galaxy.
Wow.
Hello.
Is that the one? Is it the Emmett one?
All of a sudden, a marching band started to play on our street.
Ah, and there's Jan. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, we
But
made
that's
it.
not Galaxy. Who's this? There's another. This is
Or maybe we here. Do a creative speech.
So, any thoughts, critiques, questions, anything? You guys can just throw it out there, and even if it's not a question, it could just be a comment. Throw it out.
I was kind of surprised at the all the critiquing, which was interesting to hear from an artist perspective, like on both ends, like the reasoning for the photo and then the critiquing of the photo. How does it feel to have your work critiqued like that?
Well, you know, being in Germany, I'm totally used to it.
Okay.
No, it's normal. I think the last 10 years, growing up around photographers and people who really take this seriously, it's I've gotten used to it, and yeah, I think it's good, because if you're not critiqued, then you just think that you are the best, and that is not true. You know, like you need to be critiqued. Sometimes hardcore, sometimes very, very lightly.
Mhm.
So yeah, because I love what Julian says, because often I'll look at one photo for a month or 2 or 3 months, and I absolutely love it, but then I actually need to hear a critique, or else I'm just going to get too high up and just think that this photo is the best thing, when in reality it's not speaking to anyone except me. So.
Yeah, I believe that criticism and a dialogue with somebody who you trust about your imagery helps you grow. I mean, one of my problems right now is that I'm sort of living in a critical desert here in Miami. I haven't created friends, having left New York 6, 7 years ago, and don't have a lot of operation here. So yeah, so criticism, I think as artists we grow through criticism. That's the only way we can really grow. The criticism is simply people buy your images or somebody talks to you about it. That's all of that's important
Mhm.
to help you grow.
not in my own defense, but I make it a point to try and put myself in the artist's position. In this case, in Taylor's position, to see what he's presented, and to see if I can understand how I, as a viewer, can have the same experience that he's having as an artist with the same material. And that's one of the greatest challenges that I've seen artists go through, not just in my time as a gallerist, but also growing up and hearing the conversations at the dinner table. And also my brother going through grad school at SVA, and Sean going to the same school. So I think it's really important for the dialogue, you know, for all the reasons that James pointed to, but also that everything that an artist produces needs to understand, or the artist needs to understand, that this critique happens, and it either happens with you knowing about it or without you knowing about it. And it's, I think, much wiser to embrace it than to and this is going to sound harsh, take it with a grain of salt, than to keep lying to yourself and thinking that your work's the best, and discovering at some point when it's way too far down the road that it's not. And oftentimes we're talking about microscopic shifts and changes, things that, if anyone has looked at the post or the darkroom processing of some of Avedon's pictures, many of those pictures in the rendering that we have of them in our memory are only that great because he spent extensive amounts of time in the darkroom defining exactly how to make those prints. And none of that is accidental. And I think that the lack of accidentalness in Avedon's work is one of the reasons why the quality of his images is so consistently high. And I mean, it's like anything that looks like it's accidental and is great is probably involved with just a really huge amount of work to get it there. If you can make things look accidental, then you're absolutely on top of your game.
Yeah, I suspect even the decisive moment was not totally accidental.
Yeah, I agree.
It just looked that way.
Yeah.
And that's the strength in those images.
Absolutely. So, which of you is an artist?
Really?
I'll accept that.
Yeah, James, we've got to do one of these sessions with your work as well.
Yeah. For sure.
Sure.
For sure.
As soon as I figure out the technology, I'm old school, large format film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this technology is easy. I just mash the button here and it shows up. So be glad to work with you guys on that.
Yeah. So what are the challenges that are, we've got a group of artists now sitting together. How do you all feel about what's going to happen in the creative process in the next 2 to 3 years, considering all of the drastic shifts and the impact that these social and business changes are going to have on the creative process?
All right, let me. I think there's in photography and teaching photography, one of the advantages of digital photography is that the feedback loop for students is much quicker. And so if you talk about what's happening in the art world today, the feedback loop between creating, showing, and getting feedback from it is going to be lengthened. It's not going to be quite as easy, to show real objects as quickly as it has been in the past. The possibility of showing images digitally, websites and so forth is probably, if it's utilized well, it'll happen much quicker. So, the dichotomy of those changes is part of what I think is ahead of us.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as well the last weeks, and I follow a lot of commercial photographers who sell really, really, really big photographs, and kind of just seeing what their market looks like. And I don't know, a lot of photographers like them are, I don't know if they're freaking out, but they're also trying to find new ways. How can you still survive fully as an artist in a time of crisis where many people paychecks have been cut or percentages of their paycheck has dropped, and some of them are still surprisingly finding people who are wanting to buy their work for $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever. So I'm unsure. I don't know if it'll be a positive or negative, but I just feel like in this time, people are realizing, it's a creative, what's it called? Not an outburst, but I feel like it's a time where a lot of people are going in their shells, getting the creative energy ready and stirring, and are eventually, in a few months, people are going to want to continue outbursting and buying records, buying movies, buying photographs, buying paintings, because if we can't go out and see them, then hopefully people will want them in their home. I mean, I don't know, but
It is, from a gallerist standpoint, one of the larger challenges is how do you get people to commit to buying something. There was I read an article on ArtNet News today about this, where there was mention of the Art Basel Hong Kong digital fair, which apparently has been at least in degree successful, particularly considering that it's the first time and it was done in such an emergency situation. And the larger galleries all have, at least stated that they've done well, but it was then also said that, even if a buyer commits to buying a picture for 10,000 or 100,000 or a million or whatever, I mean, these are all, these sound like great numbers to have, but in all honesty, nobody will send money over unless they know the work ahead of time, meaning they're buying something that they've already seen at some point, or they will reserve the right to step back from the purchase if when they see the work, it isn't what they expected. And digital technology cannot replace physical engagement. It's a caveat. It's an absolute caveat. I liken that to a picture of a meal and eating the meal. You can get hungry looking at a picture of a meal, but you can't get full looking at a picture of a meal. And I think that one of the large challenges that we're going to have is how do we deal with the physicality of it? In the end, people aren't buying ideas. I mean, ideas are free. You can't lock them down. The most you can do is lock down someone else's ability to create something with an idea, hence patents and copyrights. But you can't lock people's ability to think about ideas down. And so you can't sell them. And so we end up in this kind of, this fundamental challenge of us, or me as a gallerist, taking a picture and, how do I, even if you want this picture, how do I sell it to you? How do I get it to you? How do I sell it to you?
Yeah.
How do I make that happen? And that was the reason why the art fairs were so great, because everyone would go to the art fair. You could go, you could see what you were buying. And everybody had the greatest wares laid out on the counter. And it's like, here it is. Take what you want. And
the webinar mode.
Right. Oh, it's Zoomy type thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to even suggest that I have an answer to that question, but I think that's a challenge that all the artists who are working now have to deal with. And me as a gallerist and a dealer very much has to deal with. There's things like logistical chain control, like optimized shipping processes.
Yeah.
Or, one possibility would be virus neutral viewing rooms, like self-sanitizing viewing rooms. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but if you put a sheet of glass in a room, which is reflects free, and then you put the pictures behind the glass on the wall presented, and then you have the room which just gets gassed every time somebody enters. It gasses it once, kills everything, and the next person can come in. You could do that, but that all just seems kind of ridiculous considering the fact that we're not even that's just forget it. Sorry, that's just me being crazy.
So I think your challenge as a dealer in photographic images is less than somebody selling 7 by 8 foot abstract paintings. That the challenge for the paintings is more of the feel and texture and the presence of something that size, whereas photography is a known entity that if somebody specifically, and I think I've said this before here, is that knows what a gelatin silver print is and sees an image of it, they have like a 90% chance of understanding what it is, as opposed to that 7 by 8 foot painting. That the interpretation or the translation of the image to the object is less severe or less significant in your realm than the other ones. Given that I think people buy photo images because they like photography, So there's a lot of the difficulty is past in dealing with photographs online. It's not all gone. I mean, there's still a personal contact and relationship that you have as a dealer to sell an image that you don't at all have when you're dealing in the medium that we're dealing with now.
Although, there's a very real chance that if we're spending significantly more time in our own four walls, and most of us, well, actually all of us have a finite number of running meters in their house, that smaller pictures may become more popular again because you can actually fit them in your house.
Totally agree.
I've got one shelf in my two. I've got two shelves in my gallery in the storage unit for big pictures, and they are the bane of my life. Getting anything out of those shelves is horrible because you're always in fear you're going to break something. And all the nice small pictures that you can carry, like take under your arm and get on the subway with gas mask.
So let me just ask you, what's big in dimensions? What's
the largest picture I have right now actually is from Puri Photo, the large picture that Sean did of the drone, which is the image is 1.20 meters by 1.50 meters. And the whole thing weighs about 25 kilos.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
But even a 20 by 24 photograph isn't huge by those standards, is it?
No, anything you can roll up and send to somebody is doable as long as the material allows for that. There's certain papers that will allow that, others won't. And, there's always ways to put them between board and have them shipped. And I mean, like Hasenkamp, Brandl, what is it? The American Dietl. Dietl is one of the major transporters of artworks. So there's all these companies that are specialized in doing this. So it's not a question that it's, the ability to move the stuff around is there. Getting connected to the logistics chain, like Amazon has proven to us that you can send anything by anyone to anyone anywhere from any source to any location. So it's not a question of it being impossible. It's just a question of the art world embracing it. Maybe it'll end up being like, when you buy shoes online, you get yourself 3 pairs sent, and like the same pair of shoes in 3 different sizes, you figure out which ones fit, and the other 2 you send back. That's a possibility. Who knows? Anyways.
Art's a little more expensive than shoes, though.
Generally, yes, I found.
Depends on what shoes you're buying.
The shoes I buy.
Right.
Well, but even unframed photographs can be put between cardboard and shipped FedEx. I mean, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, no, the larger issue with that is currently is customs. It's not the pictures themselves. It's, being allowed to send them. America has an import duty of 25% on all artwork, I think, right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank our president.
Yeah, like that guy a lot.
A couple more months, just be patient.
In Europe or in Germany, at least, anything that's over a certain book value or by certain artists can't be shipped out without approval from the Kultusministerium.
Yeah.
And in France, they have issues with similar issues. They deal with it a bit differently. So I think that's one of the larger issues that we have. So. Anyhow. Well, listen, everybody, this has been fun. Taylor, thanks for presenting and sharing your work with us. Everyone else, thanks for joining. It's great to have more than just 2 or 3 people here. So come back as often as possible and join the conversation. Next Tuesday, I'm doing the 3rd radio lecture by August Sander, translated to English, with a discussion afterwards. And please get the word out. If anyone who's interested in that is welcome to join the discussion. And next Thursday, I don't know what I'm doing yet. something.
Well,
And the gallery is open again next week.
That's
We're allowed to
amazing.
Open gallery, so
congrats.
That's so cool.
anyone who's in the area can actually come by and one at a time, please.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for giving me the open platform to share and speak. And thank you guys, everyone who's tuned in from America, Germany, and England. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. It's been interesting.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank
Take
you
care,
for
everybody.
sharing your details.